Yo, everybody, welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the owner of Books with Pictures, a comic shop in Portland, Oregon. It's Katie Proctor. Thanks for coming on, Katie.
Great to be here, David.
So, your shop, Books with Pictures, is one I'm quite fond of. I've been in there, looked through it, love everything about it. It's also one I love from afar, but I want to talk about what's going on in your shop. But before we get into it, I want to talk about how you got to the point of being a comic shop owner. Like, what made you want to open a comic book shop, and what made Books with Pictures that idea, like the one you wanted to open?
Gosh, well, I every time I sit and try to account for myself in sort of a resume sort of way, it is a big old mess because I've done a lot of things and I've done them very well, but I haven't had two consecutive jobs in the same industry ever. So I'm doomed to perpetual self-employment. So immediately before this, I was working as a tech consultant. I was partner in a sales and services training consultancy. We worked with tech startups who needed to train their new people as they were in hypergrowth, and they didn't have a team to do that internally, so we'd hop on and be their training department for 6-8 months. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I got to work with my best friend, and we hit a point about 3 odd years into the business where it was clear that we were 6 months from then either going to be business partners or best friends, but probably not both of those things. And so by very mutual agreement decided that we needed to wind down the company. And so we stopped taking on new contracts, and we sort of made a roadmap for how we were going to wrap up the company in 6 to 9 months, which meant that I had a period where I was making good money. It was a period where my then husband was unemployed. So I was breadwinner, but making good money, and knew that I was going to be unemployed in about 8 months. And so then I went into the period of like, well, do I look for a job for someone else? Do I start a new company? Do I look for a new business partner? What do I want to do? Before that, I ran a magazine, and before that, I was an academic, for context. So it's a big old mess. And so I was sitting down with my friends, and I was spending a lot of time talking about sort of jobs I'd had that I loved. And my favorite job ever was selling books in an independent bookstore in the late 1990s in a little town in Central California. And in a bookstore that is now a tanning salon, may it rest in peace. And it was the Harry Potter release years. I got to run the children's section, so I was really involved with running story times and events in that sort of context. And I have a really good mind for connecting people with the thing that they want to read, a really good mind for, I don't remember the name of the book, but it came out last week and it's blue. That sort of interaction with books is something that I'm just very good at, and I really, really enjoy it. And so running a bookstore has always been on my list of dream jobs. And then I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, I'm in Portland, and by beautiful, weird coincidence, since I've been in Portland, at that point, I'd been in Portland for 7 years or so. Half of my friends are comic book people. They work for Dark Horse. They work for, they're professional artists. They work for Marvel. They do self-publishing, whatever. Like, this is my world. And lots of what we sat around and did while drinking was complain about what the industry really needs is usually a good, inclusive, feminist comic store. What we really need is the publishers keep falling back on, well, the real customer in the direct market is not the comics buyer, it's the comic shop owner. And so we need more representation among comic shop owners if we want to see the shape of the industry start to shift and change. And so in this moment, when I had some real money and about to not have a job, the question of, hey, what if I was that comic shop owner, started to come up. And I sat down and wrote a business plan for it and went through the sort of small business association um, mentorship program and sort of started throwing numbers around, basically looking at a business plan and what rents went for, and did I think that I could make a shop work? Um, and sent the business plan to my non-comics friends. Hey, does this look like a plausible business plan for someone who doesn't live in this world?
Mm-hmm.
Um, as well as starting to network with comic shops owners. So, Car D'Angelo of Earth 2 Comics in Southern California was hugely supportive. And gosh, who else? I had some really good conversations with a lot of people. And as it looked increasingly like a thing that might happen, sort of my comics support group here were Jay Edidin, who's now in New York, but at the time lived here, who does the Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men podcast and is just a superhuman being and one of my very good friends. And then Douglas Wolk, who wrote Reading Comics, which won an Eisner a decade ago, and is currently in the middle of writing a book about reading all 27,000 Marvel comic books because he's a masochist. And but the three of us spent a lot of time sitting around and talking. And one night after possibly the queerest possible evening out, Jay and I went to a Dar Williams show. And we sat and we listened to Dar Williams and we cried and then we went out drinking. And we're brainstorming names for the shop and landed on Books with Pictures. And sort of when we landed on Books with Pictures, there was this moment of just like staring at each other and being like, oh, that's the thing. We were looking for something that said comics, but was like the most approachable possible way to talk about comics. That this isn't about having to already cross any kind of barrier or bar. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to like books that have pictures in them. And as long as you're there, you can come in and find your place. And so that's what we did. And once it had a name, it was kind of a thing and needed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, it was actually a really short arc to finding real estate, putting in a diamond order, and sort of getting things moving.
Yeah. No, I think Books with Pictures is a phenomenal name, if only because it feels very approachable if you're a parent, I think. And I know that inclusivity of kids, of readers who might not normally be represented at like the typical direct market store. I know that's a big thing for you. So I think that, I mean, it's a really perfect name. So, you talked about how you talked to Car D'Angelo and you also talked to other shops and everything like that. I actually had a patron ask specifically about how much you pay attention to what other shops are doing even now that you've opened the shops. Like, do you look to them at all for not even necessarily like ordering or anything like that, but like what events are working for other people or anything like that?
I am in constant conversation with other readers. It is absolutely a major part of my sort of daily existence. My best day-to-day conversation is with, let's see, there's Menachem Lukens, who runs Escape Pod Comics on Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
There's Juliet Capra, who's been at a number of stores. She was at Fantastic Comics for a long time in Oakland and is now at Cape and Cowell, which is also in Oakland. And then when I was designing the store, one of my major touchstones was Isotope Comics in San Francisco, the comic book lounge.
Yeah.
Which I think is just a beautiful, beautiful spot. And it's about the same square footage as my shop. But I also, James at Isotope is one of the first people I told that I wanted to open a comic book shop. Sort of in a moment where I wasn't really ready to say that out loud, but I was down in San Francisco for work for my tech job. And it was a Wednesday. And so I went in to visit him and had this amazing, like 2-hour sort of very nurturing, mentoring conversation that was just, I don't know. He probably doesn't remember it, but it meant a lot to me. And then I actually connected with Carr through the Comics Pro organization, which is the professional organization for comic book retailers, and they have a mentorship program. So that's how I connected with him.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and then there used to be an organization called the Valkyries, which was an organization for women in comic book retail. I have met so many of my both personal and professional contacts through that group, and I'm really, really sad that it came apart earlier this year. But nonetheless, sort of having this network, and I've mostly maintained the network, fortunately, having this network of women who work in comic book retail has been amazing, so supportive. But yeah, there's we do blind bags, for instance, of comics. And there was once a thread on the Valkyries where everybody just posted what their blind bag labeling looked like.
Mm.
And they sort of shifted to make theirs look better and pull good ideas. There was a lot of like, post your theme display. What's your theme display that you have up this week? The other big thing that I'm working on right now is that the shop just shifted point of sale software from Mobi, which got end of life, next month.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's this sort of FileMaker Pro system that runs on Macs, which is the kind of computer I am used to using, and that we've been running since we opened, but it's going away, and I don't really want to continue using software that is not getting updated or supported in any way. So I'm switching to Comic Hub, on which I am approximately user number 40. It's better than being like user number 7, but user number 40 means that it's still pretty buggy and we're all figuring it out, and the onboarding process is pretty rocky, and I'm very excited to have it in place and working, but it's not there yet. And so like one of the great things that happened this week is that I hit a snag. The support folks were not available for me at the moment I was trying to check in this box of books that had just come in. And so I posted to the users forum, and this guy, Joe Murray, jumps back in and says, can I just call you? And I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. And I sit on the phone with this guy who doesn't work for the software company. He's just another retailer. And he sits and walks me through how to use my new software for an hour.
Wow.
Out of the goodness of his heart, so far as I can tell. And it was amazing. And now I know how to do that thing.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I actually I was at Comics Pro's annual meeting in Portland this year, and I think I met the person who runs Comics Hub, and it was kind of a conversation because he or that person was there just kind of trying to get people to sign up for it because it was such a new thing, and that would be intimidating. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's kind of it kind of fits what you're trying to do, because a lot of what you're doing is a little bit, you're kind of zigging while a lot of other shops zag. I'm kind of curious, like, given the fact you were focused at being more inclusive to the people who are not normally represented by comic book shops, did you look to maybe stores that weren't comic shops to like kind of think about how you wanted to handle merchandising and lay out your store and everything like that?
So much, yes. So when I was pitching the shop, a lot of times what I opened with was that it's like Shebop, but for comic books. Do you know Shebop?
It sounds familiar. Remind me.
It's a sex toy store.
Oh, okay.
But in particular, it is focused on being an inclusive, queer-friendly, trans-friendly, feminist sex toy store. So you can walk in and get your, vibrators and your dildos and your whatever in an environment that does not feel creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would not say that comic book stores are as traditionally creepy as adult stores, but I actually think there's a lot of similarities there.
Sure.
And so finding the way to merchandise in a way that feels calm rather than busy, and clean rather than, as my friend Patrick Farley once put it, sticky.
Mm-hmm.
And just like a place where you can put your bag down on the floor and not worry about it. Like a place where your eyes have visually somewhere to rest without being overwhelmed. Yeah, I think a lot about how She Bop manages their also very bright and colorful and visually engaging stock. Um, I mean, having my background in traditional bookstores rather than comic book shops meant that that's a thing I definitely draw on. Um, I stared at Apple stores for a while
Mm-hmm.
because they are very good at being sort of visually calm. But in terms of the design of the store, a lot of my emphasis was on trying to find ways to let each piece of each comic book that you could see sort of have its own space to be visual art um, without crowding them. Because I think comics covers are such an amazing art form, and I really wanted to give space to just see them without them competing with each other.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think actually I had a patron question that was just about like the layout and look at your store. They said that they'd been into your store and they just were like in love with it, and the fact that you had everything laid out so nicely and you could see so much of the product. I know that a lot of shops, like some of the nicest shops that I know, try really hard to have as much inventory face out as you possibly can, even though that can be a little bit difficult from just a space standpoint, because if you're not kind of lining everything up next to each other, it's like you're cutting down on your space, even though it's gaining you like the ability for people to be like, wow, this cover looks amazing. Um, so I guess when it came to like the layout of your store and how you display your product, how do you balance that out? How do you balance out that need for like getting as much inventory in there as you can while still making it something that draws people in because they see like these beautiful works?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And my quintessential face out store is actually Atlantis Fantasy World in Santa Cruz. Have you been there?
Mm-mm.
So Atlantis Fantasy World is an old school shop. They've been around forever. They are run by this fabulous guy named Joe, who also gave me a huge chunk of his time. But that was one of the only comic shops that I spent any time in as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he faces everything.
Mm.
There are no spine out objects. Um, and the only things in bins are sort of in his back room bin digging space. But he faces everything in the store. It's also the comic book store from the Lost Boys, that comic book
Oh,
store.
nice.
Um, and he he also shelves really innovatively. I'm really interested in the way he does things. And also, when I was walking through with him, it was clear that it wasn't going to work for me. Um, and the reason is because I really wanted to focus on having the majority of my product be trades.
Mm.
Um, and so there needs to be like some bookstore space. Now, I keep a really tight turn on my inventory. I clearance trades after 6 months. So if a book has not sold in the last 6 months, it gets clearanced or sold wholesale. I get rid of it. So part of how I keep the shelves clean is just by making sure that there is no slow turning product. If somebody wants something that's not moving, I special order it, and I'm always happy to, and we get it in about a week. Um, but keeping a tight handle on the product we have as product that sells is a way of making sure that there's enough room that you can focus on the things I'm featuring. That the other thing that I really keep a close eye on. So our stepping back, our single issue shelves are in bays in between the bookshelves. And they're custom built plexiglass and wood. Each one only holds one comic book. So there's actually physically no way for the comic books to sort of overlap and layer like there is on a lot of sort of more old school floppy shelves.
Yeah.
Um, and that's deliberate. It does limit how much I can put on the shelf, but it's also a sort of it's good discipline for making sure that everything that is there is what I intend to be there. Um, but both there and in the cube shelves where books get faced anywhere there's room for them, um, I make a point of stepping back and making sure that at least half of the faces you see are women and people of color.
Mm.
Um, so you should not ever look at the bookshelf and see only white dudes looking back at you,
Yeah.
um, which I think actually makes a huge difference in how the store feels to be in. Because you're never going to just be overwhelmed by all of Conan's thews with the occasional Thor thews thrown in. Um, and so being mindful not just about facing as much as I can, but also what is being faced and what is on the covers of the floppies I'm buying is really helpful for me in terms of sort of shaping that feel in the display.
Yeah, I mean that I think that makes a lot of sense given the fact that you don't. I feel like if you're that shop of any variety that says you're the inclusive shop, and then you go in there and it doesn't feel like it and it doesn't look like it, I think people would kind of sniff you out pretty fast, and
Mm-hmm.
and that would be not ideal. But I do want to say one thing going back to what you said earlier about like the sex toy shop and everything like that. One time I actually had like a shop compare. They said something along the lines of like parents typically have in their minds that comic shops are kind of just like one step away from like that kind of shop. And so it's like you have to overcome that by like making it, making the shop feel more welcoming. And one thing I do really like about your shop is it's very bright. And
Mm-hmm.
and then the like most of your bookshelves, are they white if I remember correctly?
They are white. Yep.
Yeah, I mean like that and also the fact that if I remember correctly the back end is like open. It makes it feel very airy and bright in a way that most shops don't, and that has a really welcoming
My
feel. And
ceilings are also like 20 feet high.
what's
Yeah.
that?
My ceilings are also like 20 feet high.
Yeah, yeah, that's really nice. Also, I do want to give you a shout out because one thing that you told me when I came in was the fact that your shop, like the shelves, are actually all on wheels, right?
Everything that sits in the middle of the floor is on wheels. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like that's awesome because then you can kind of rearrange if you're having events and everything. I think it's a very ingenious layout because you're making your shop as versatile as possible while like making it easy to kind of get back into the same position if you wanted to. I don't know. I imagine that saves a lot of time and a lot of pain from having to lift so many things.
Yeah. So the space itself is physically very really tricky. It is 65 feet long and 15 feet wide. Um, and so it's sort of a subway tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew going in that holding events was a critical part of the role I wanted to be playing in the community. And so, but if I just left it a subway tunnel with open floor space for events, that was going to make it really hard to shelve books and also just make it not very inviting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the shelves that hold down the children's section are actually have bays they fit into on the walls. So they can go entirely against the walls. They're actually these giant, beautiful fixtures that were originally Uggs boots sales fixtures.
Mm-hmm.
They're huge. They're on wheels. They were black when I got them. They have like 6 coats of white paint on them. Um, and they really do, those pieces in particular really do both create the cozy, inviting children's section and also completely go away when I need them to.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, so my mom's education background is in Montessori. My mom's a school teacher, retired now. And my kids also did a lot of Montessori school. And one of the things I love about Montessori sort of design mindset is that um, children behave in the ways that spaces invite them to behave. And so you want to create a space for children that physically enables the behaviors you want to encourage and physically discourages the behaviors you don't want to see. Um, and so when I was designing the kids section, I spent a lot of time on like there should be comfortable places for kids to sit and be calm. There should not be a lot of space to pick things up and fling them. I don't actually keep a lot of toys in my kids section because I feel that that sort of ups the energy level of engagement in a way that's harder for parents to manage and harder for me as a retailer to manage.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very book centric space, and it's a very like I am hugely encouraging of sitting and reading, and I know that that's not across the board what retailers like, but for me, it's more important to be a comfortable space where kids want to be. So I encourage kids to come in and sit and read. Um, and so, like, creating a space that feels calm and inviting was part of the point. A thing I love is that parents come in and say, "Hey, can you show me where the children's section is?" Children, even on their very first visit, come into the store, walk down the aisle, see the kids section, and go into it. They don't
Hmm.
need to ask. Obvious to them that that is the space that's for them. And that really tells me that I designed that space in a way that's inviting and working.
That's awesome. And I like that you provide a sitting area because as a kid who grew up reading comics, I can tell you they probably would be sitting even if you didn't offer a sitting area. And so,
Totally.
yeah, so it's like you actually, I think subconsciously, it's like you're permitting them to do what they want to do so they don't have to feel uncomfortable with, like, do I sit down? Is it bad to sit down? You're just saying you
Right.
can sit down.
Right. Physically without having to say that. I also have a large seating area in the back um, that I'm constantly waffling on whether it's too much space or not. Um, but I've recently, so we run a lot of events and meetups and mixers and lectures. But I recently attracted a growing group of um, self-organized writers who are all people of color who are doing a sort of half book club, half writers group, like reading swap.
Hmm.
And they are all regular customers of mine, but it's become a Saturday afternoon thing that if I don't have something going on, they're there
Hmm.
and working on their scripts and talking about comic books and having the space where that can be happening feels like it really justifies that space, even when I'm not actively programming it. Because if I'm not programming it now, my community is, and that thrills me.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, I've talked to a lot of shops who say that events are increasingly important these days, and you do offer a lot of different types of events. Like the group you were just talking about, you have signings. You've had concerts before, right?
We've had the double click several times,
Mm-hmm.
um, who are a nerd duo. I feel like the most easy way to describe them is as a comedy duo, but all of their songs make me cry, so that's not quite right. But
Yeah.
they're yeah, they do nerd songs.
Yeah.
Um, Fantastic. We've also had a young woman named Lucia Fasano came in and actually sort of uh, she did a show with the double clicks, but she also came in and sort of arranged a holiday variety show last year
Mm.
where she played a bunch of music, some with her partner, and then also there were comedy acts and poets and an improv troupe, and that was a fantastic night. But yeah, concerts. We do have some restrictions on amplification in the space, so we try to keep it under control.
Hmm.
Um, Lectures. Douglas Wolk in particular has given great lectures. Jen Van Meter gave a writing workshop that was amazing. Um, Lillian Karabek is a local personal finance coach. She came in and did a class on personal finance and taxes for independent artists. That was brilliant.
That's amazing.
Uh, so yeah, lots of different kinds of programming, and of course, readings and signings and um, your standard comic book fare. But also, God, we had Mark Russell did the Snagglepuss Chronicles
Hmm.
this year. That was his sort of re-envisioning of Snagglepuss the Pink Lion as um, a closeted gay playwright in New York City. It was Tennessee Williams, give or take. And we threw a huge launch party for that at the beginning of the year that was all sort of dapper costumed with fancy period punches and cocktail snacks and that was a great party. That was our sort of it was like right after New Year's, so it felt very New Year's party, snow on the ground and whatnot. And then most recently, our big party was we had a launch party for Maneaters #1. Chelsea Kane came. She brought her daughter Eliza and her husband and all of Eliza's friends. So it was like overrun by 13-year-old girls, which was fantastic. And they did weird performance art all night. And we sold a lot of copies of Maneaters, and it was fantastic. So, yeah, we have a good time.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think that stuff's great because not only does it, it makes your shop like a community. It makes it people feel like this is a place they can go to do things that they love. But also, I mean, from a sheer like commerce standpoint, it probably makes them like stickier customers because it makes them want to come back and it like engenders like a connection to your shop. And I think that stuff is super important because Portland has a lot of options for comic shops.
Portland has a lot of options for comic shops, and the internet is full of both legal and illegal ways to acquire comics in a huge way. And I'm not blind to that. I mean, the previously mentioned indie bookstore that I came up in, um, I was there in the moment of, oh my God, Amazon's going to put us all out of business. Also, Borders is going to put us all out of business. Um, and I really deeply believe that if a comic shop is not also serving as a community space, and if you as a comic shop employee or owner or clerk, whatever, do not have specific, in-depth, targeted recommendations for your customers, they're not going to keep coming in because
Right.
comics are expensive hobby and increasingly so. Um, and you can get it cheaper on Amazon. You can get it for free on the torrent sites. I'm not going to sit here and pretend you can't. Um, what I'm going to tell people, and I do, is, I really love being here as a community space. And I really love being able to recommend you these books you've never heard of before. And if those are things you value, you need to drop at least some of your comic money with me.
Yeah. Yeah. And now, a word from our sponsor. Yo, everybody. I want to take a quick break to talk about my friends at Radio vs. the Martians. Mike Gillis and Casey Doran host the Radio vs. the Martians podcast, a show that gathers their funniest, smartest friends once a month for a deep dive into science fiction, video games, horror, comics, movies, and everything in between. So far, they've dissected topics like Superman, Steven Spielberg, Akira, George Lucas, zombies, Twin Peaks, Hayao Miyazaki, James Bond, Watchmen, and whether drivers are required to pull over for the Ghostbusters. Find this podcast and its spin-off show, Podcast La Vista, baby, a celebration of the films of thespian and statesman Arnold Schwarzenegger on iTunes, Stitcher, and at radioversusthemartians.com. And now, back to the show. I mean, I do want to get, just a couple more questions before we jump into like how the year has been going for you as a shop. But one thing I really like about your shop is that you have, you have your little special things that you offer people who come in. Like, for example, you have the section of books that Douglas Wolk, he recommends comics. So I think $3, right? Like each of them, where it's like he
They're
does.
all $3, yeah.
Yeah, there's like a little write up on each of them, like kind of saying why this comic is special, and they're these just like random little comics, and I think it's great. Like you had that video you posted on Twitter, I think, where you had him talking about why these books are awesome. It's like, oh, this one has art from this person, and this one is this comic, and everything like that, and I just think that's awesome because first off, you obviously are doing a good job of trying to attract people who are new to comics or have an idea of what they're looking for, but they don't know exactly what. But then for like somebody who maybe has advanced on to like the 201 reader or something like that, then Douglas comes in and he's got these like zany recommendations that are great comics that they might not think about buying. Like that's awesome. I love that. And then also I had a patron who specifically asked about the subscription packs. Because like that's a cool thing that a lot of shops don't do. Like, why do you want to do those things that are a little bit different than what other shops are offering?
I mean, because those are things we're great at. So Douglas Wolk is always he's my secret weapon.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I love about so in addition to being a comics reviewer, Douglas is a music critic, and he has a depth of knowledge about music that I never ever ever will. It's not a thing that I love music, I love listening to music, I love making music, but I don't have that kind of it's not as easy for me as books are. And so when I read his music reviews, I probably don't get the references. I probably need a lot of backstory I don't have. It's probably about a band I've never heard of, even if they're very famous. And he has this knack for writing about things that you assume are esoteric and are probably kind of complicated, and inviting you in to love it as much as he does.
Mm-hmm.
And it is this mode of communicating that I admire and I strive to emulate whenever I can, because it's not, well, none of us know about it anyway. Of course it's hard. Instead, it's like, yes, I do know everything you need to know about this thing. Let me give you the tools you need to come and have fun in this pool with me. Um, and I think that his post-its on those books is a really lovely form of doing that. They're also just really fun, and I learn something every time he brings them in.
Yeah.
Uh, and Douglas and I also we try to make them weekly comics reviews. Weekly's hard, schedules are tricky, but more or less weekly comics reviews on YouTube, which we have a good time with. And then the subscription packs they serve a few purposes for us. So hopefully when Comic Hub is fully implemented, we will have a fully functional online store, which I'm really looking forward to for all of our inventory. But when we were on Mobi, the concept of having a functional online store was entirely out of reach. It was not something that any of us had man hours to do. Which is to say, it's not something I had man hours to do. And a lot of my, so about a year ago, the shop was in a financial position where, we were actively losing money faster than was sustainable. Like, my business plan presumes that I'm not going to be consistently making money for another 2 or 3 years yet, but like the bleed was too heavy.
Right.
And so I put out, actually on my Facebook, because I have really smart friends, I put out on my Facebook, hey, if you were me and you had my resources, how would you be making more money than I'm making? And a desire to have curated subscriptions was a thing that came in from a few different people. And the line was usually, every time I talk to you about comics, you recommend something great that I haven't heard of, but I can't come in because I live far away or because my schedule's very busy. And it doesn't do me any good to, my line for online orders had been, well, just email me and we'll work it out. And you can send me money and I'll send you what you want. And the feedback I was getting was, I don't know what I want.
Right.
What I want is that thing that you would recommend to me if we were sitting down and having a conversation, but we can't do that. And so the curated subscriptions, we have a handful of different options. We have an LGBT option. We have a protagonist of color option. We have a just best of the month for grown-ups option. And then 3 different kids subscriptions, little kids, which is like kids under 6. And then for bigger kids, with and without superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
And those are fine-tuned enough that most subscribers are mostly getting stuff they like out of the gate. And then sometimes I get really good feedback from individual customers that are like, hey, I can't do body horror. And all of that like queer themed body horror you're sending me, it's obviously good, but it's way too much for me.
Right.
Please don't send me that or anything else like it anymore. And then I just put a note on the file. And so it's like, hey, new queer themed horror series comes out. Please don't send it to that customer. Number One with a Bullet recently, by the way, queer horror series, so good. Don't send it to that customer. No good for them. And so making them curated and then fine-tuned a little bit has been a really fun way to keep engaging people with comics who maybe don't have a shop close to them or don't have a shop they feel comfortable with close to them, who I can then make recommendations to, get some feedback from. And at this point we have, it's a little over 50 monthly subscribers. The other great thing is that if I see a book coming out that I feel super good about and so order really heavy on, and then the in-store sales don't meet that expectation, my subscribers can have them.
That's awesome.
And that makes sure that that inventory keeps moving, even though it's not returnable. And my eyes were bigger than my customers' stomachs. Um, so it's also a good way to keep that kind of inventory moving.
Yeah. No, no, that's great. I mean, it kind of fits with your theme where you're talking about you only let the graphic novels sit for 6 months before you clearance them. But actually, really quick, one more question about the clearance in the graphic novels and everything like that. I'm curious, do you every shop is going to have Watchmen, and every shop is going to have like a lot of the traditional books, but like Watchmen may not necessarily fit exactly what you're trying to do. Do you do you not feel the need to have like 10 deep of like trades of that book or something like that, because you know that that's not necessarily something you need to service because Portland is so heavy in shops? Like do you think about inventory in that sort of way?
It is. I keep two
Yeah.
Watchmen shop on the shelf. That's my Watchmen stock. I keep one V for Vendetta. I don't keep any of the Killing Joke, and you would be amazed at how rarely it comes up. Um, just I I find it a problematic book. I think Miller finds it a problematic book. I'll totally special order it if people want it, but if I'm going to recommend people Batman, that's not the Batman I'm going to recommend them, and I don't feel the need to keep it around.
Sure.
Um, there's also other books that are definite standards for me that may not be the standard in every shop. My best-selling trade is Bitch Planet Volume 1,
Mm.
hands down. Um, After that is Saga Volume 1. After that is The Wicked and the Divine Volume 1. So we're an image-heavy shop across the board. Um, After that is Saga Volume 8. We sell a lot of Saga. Um, um, there's a book from a smaller press called Vault Comics called Heathen,
Mm.
uh, which is about a lesbian Viking who gets thrown out of her village for kissing girls and decides that it's her mission to rescue a magically imprisoned Valkyrie who can only be rescued by her true love. That I sell an absurd number of because that pitch and my clientele are a really good match.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Likewise, there's a book that came out last year, just a single volume from Boom called God Shaper,
That was a
which
Cy
is
Spurrier book, right?
Cy Spurrier and Jonas Goonface.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so beautiful, and it is my second best-selling book from 2017. Because I fell in love with it, and my manager Nick fell in love with it, and between the two of us, we just hand sold it to everybody who came in the door, and then we're hundreds of volumes deep into this thing.
Wow.
There was actually a period where they ran out of the first printing, and we were like, "No, what will we sell to people?" They made more. It's fine. Um, but so there's a few books like that that are like this is a shelf staple for us. I don't think any other shop in the country sells as many of that book as we do, honestly.
I always think it's really interesting talking to retailers and just hearing what books do really well for them, because there was this shop in Texas that's run by a woman named Jen King, and they sold really heavy on this book called like Anne Bonny. And I remember I got several emails from other shops being like, what is that book? Like shops had like literally never even heard of this comic, but it was like her third biggest selling comic of the year. And it's
Yeah.
just sometimes that's how it works. But I am kind of curious, like you said that you're an image heavy shop. Do you find that in general you're a more graphic novel and trade slash non big two shop overall?
So it's a tricky thing, actually. So in single issues, Marvel is our top. Then this is interesting. Marvel, then Image,
Sure.
then Boom, then
Oh,
DC.
whoa.
Yeah. Um, but only 30% of our sales year to year are floppies. 70% of our sales are trades
Wow.
or, standalone graphic novels. So in terms of product mix, we really look like a bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in graphic novels, it is, oh gosh, Tom King messed this all up with Batman. It sold so much Batman, and the Vision. Um, so with graphic novels, it's definitely image first. Uh, Marvel doesn't do so well in bound volumes for me, I think because the pricing is so high.
Yeah, and the
Um,
quality's a little weird too.
they're thin, the paper's way too thin, the covers bend. I really wish they were doing better on that count because I've got a huge, in particular, X fan audience, as well as like everybody loves America. Could we please have Young Avengers back? Iceman's doing okay. Anyway, like I have a really Marvel loyal audience, and I have a hard time selling them Marvel trades because they're not the greatest product right now.
Hmm.
Um, I do tons of Boom trades, especially kids. Um, and then Fantagraphics does great for me. Drawn and Quarterly does great for me.
Hmm.
Scholastic obviously does great for me. If Raina Telgemeier has breathed on it, it sells.
I was just gonna say, like, I feel like because you do offer like a kid centric space, that probably helps. I had Brian Hibbs on my podcast recently, and he was talking about how like one of the biggest stories for him in 2018 has been like the kids comics boom continuing, and about how it's been a really good lineup. Like this year has had some. You haven't had any Raina, but you've had like Faith Erin Hicks had a new book. There's a new volume of Amulet, and like so when one of those books come out, is that kind of an event for your event for your younger readers in some ways?
Yeah, I mean, Dogman
Oh yeah.
is current king of kid comics. And so the new Dogman volume, I think we got two cases in our initial. Um, and we've reordered since then.
Wow.
Um, Same with Amulet. We were selling Amulet the first day. We got cases of Amulet. We are still selling Amulet every day. Um, and then also, yeah, that second Nameless City book was a big, or the third Nameless City book was a big deal for us.
Hmm.
Uh, the, well, I guess both of those were this year. So yes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, but also like the Hilda Netflix series means that the Hilda books are suddenly just can't keep them on the shelves,
Yeah.
and they're amazing. And I love like I've been recommending Hilda since we opened. Hilda's great, but there's a whole new audience for Hilda right now, and it's so much fun. Um, yeah, kids. I mean, my kids are just exactly the right age for this current kids comics moment.
Hmm.
Um, and like my daughter literally learned to read in my shop because she was 4 when we opened and she's 7 now, and that's just the right span of years to be learning how to read, and so she's um, an avid reader right now, and yeah, can name every X-Man, I'm pretty sure. um,
It's a deep list. It's a
of
very
which
deep
there are
list.
101.
What's that?
um, of which there are 101 named X-Men. If
Really?
you needed to, yeah.
I don't think I would do very well on that list. It gets pretty wild after a while. I read X-Men like for most of my life, and I haven't been on it lately. But I know there's definitely some ones I'd miss, and my friends would get mad at me because I grew up in the '90s. Like that was just a massive thing. But I'm going to like where you're at right now. You were talking about how 2017 was a little was down. And I think that was a common story for a lot of shops. Has 2018 been better for you?
It has, but it's been pretty swingy. All of the expected highs and lows. I mean, I only have 2.5 years of data to look at, but I feel like I know what my annual patterns look like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my highs have been very good year over year growth, but my lows are lower.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I'm not really sure. I need to get into my data and finish my bookkeeping and really sort of dig into what I think those trends are about. Um, I've also gotten better at ordering, which definitely helps sort of my bottom line look okay. Because I over order less and I stop ordering things that aren't selling sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'm, the X-Men, the Uncanny that came out this week, that on the other hand has a great team and I am excited about what's going on with it. But on the other hand, it was an $8 number one, and eh,
Yeah.
um, I think I ordered 13 of for the shelf and I'm down to four. And like, that is a comfortable number for me. I did not go like, well, I love the X-Men and everyone else loves the X-Men and there's a new Uncanny title, so I should order 25 of that $8 comic book,
Mm-hmm.
which wouldn't have gone well. Um, on the other hand, I I sold 200, I think about 212 copies of Maneater's number one,
Mm-hmm.
where 20 is in general a high number for me for single issues. Um, Hundreds is unheard of, but it's for a lot of reasons. Chelsea's local. She's been promoting really heavily. The book is amazing. It's also set here. Um, and Chelsea has been close with the shop really since Mockingbird.
Yeah.
So that's a sort of longer running partnership at this point that feels good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the event probably helped too, a big time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's I don't know. It like going back to it again. Like it is interesting. Like I wouldn't be surprised maybe outside of like your midtowns and stuff like that if you maybe sold more man eaters than anybody. And that's just one of those things that's really interesting because there's such a fluctuation. But do you feel like one of the toughest things for you to get used to was figuring out how to separate yourself from ordering and like in the sense that it's like, oh, I want to order deep on Uncanny because it's a great team and I love X-Men and my audience loves X-Men, like trying to separate yourself from it so you get to like the realistic number rather than like the hopeful number, because the hopeful number can kill you.
Right. It actually goes both ways. So one of my really important lessons um, is to trust my gut more
Mm,
and not order a book because it looks important.
right.
Which in particular is important with the Fantagraphics and the drawn-in quarterlies, but also with some of the sort of older collections of Marvel stuff and stuff that sort of speaks to me on that, I don't know, cultural creds level of like, this book makes me uncomfortable or just doesn't speak to me at all, but like people who know are going to say this book is important and so I should have it.
Right.
Those books don't sell for me. Um, and so sort of training myself out of, oh, I should get that. Or at the same time, um, trusting more. I don't know. I used to do a lot of ordering where the mental dialogue sounded like, well, that's really not my jam, but I'm sure somebody will like it.
Right.
So I'll order some. And it's true that the store sells books that I don't like all the time. But in general, if I'm deciding whether or not to take a risk on a title, it's not a well-known creator or it's not a creator who does well for the shop or whatever. If my gut sense is, it's not worth buying. It's
Right.
not going to sell. And that's in part because hand selling is such a big part of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So I reach out to my staff, especially Nick, who's full time with me and has been with me since we opened. So he's a huge advisor for me. And so I'll reach out to him and be like, what are you excited about in the previews? But if it's something that he's not psyched on and I'm not psyched on, I really am trying to train myself not to buy them.
Right.
Because they're unlikely to do well, even if they have, a character who I know is a fan favorite character in the world. It's not a fan favorite character in my shop. And so the world may be psyched on this book, but my shop's not going to sell any.
Well, especially because it seems like one of the things that's consistently reinforced is that people go to your shop because they trust your curation and your passion for this. And it's like, if you don't have that passion, it's going to be hard to sell that book.
Yeah. I often say that not buying comic books is the hardest part of my job.
Right.
That I go through previews every month and I don't buy so many comic books.
Yeah, no, I mean, it totally makes sense. So I'm curious, like, so this year, what would you say, besides man eaters, what is working best for you, and what have you been surprised on the opposite side? Like, what hasn't been working for you?
Pretty much none of the uh God, I don't even know. Is it New Age of
Oh, New Age of
Heroes?
Heroes,
The
yeah, yeah, the DC thing,
None of those. None of them have stuck.
yeah,
Doesn't matter who's on it, how many of their other books we sell, Jeff Lemire, nothing. Cannot get traction. None of those books have stuck.
yeah,
Um, and those are on my list of now. Just like stop trying. No, nobody wants them.
mm-hmm,
Um, and and so what I've trained myself to do for those is that when someone does check out with something like that, really pushing the subscription.
mm-hmm.
Hey, you're the only person I've sold one of these to in the last. You want to subscribe so I can stop buying it for the shelf? Um, the what else? What else has not worked? Um, I'm thinking about there were a couple of I think they were Vault books that I really wanted to hit that
Mm-hmm.
didn't. Vagrant Queen from Mags of Saggio. Uh, Usually Mags is gold in my shop. She's got a lot of super fans with me. I love her stuff. That one didn't hit.
Mm-hmm.
The Weatherman from Image. It's from the guys who did Shirtless Bear Fighter, one of last year's surprise golden books.
Mm-hmm.
The Weatherman didn't take off. I think it's because they killed the dog in the first issue.
I was gonna say the
Uh,
same thing. Like, I really like that book, but I had several people to me when I talked it up. They're just like, I can't believe you like you could handle that dog part. And I'm like, I think it's a good book, but that dog part was pretty hard to handle.
it it put off a lot of readers who I think otherwise would have stuck around. It's gorgeous and it's
Right.
a really fun story. And nope, I got a lot of number ones of those sitting around. Um, the Bat Wedding went really well for me,
Mm-hmm.
actually. I think in part because I was a little bit conservative on my ordering for it. I didn't have a huge amount of stake in the game, but we did. It was our first ever midnight opening. We had a nice turnout for the midnight opening. Um, it's also I went through a divorce this year, which sucked a lot, and so all of this wedding themed stuff is just like not going great for me. I would love to not be having a year of big comic book weddings, but here
Right.
we are. Um, but we did a double opening for that Catwoman and the Coates Captain America, because Coates is one of the creators who my shop just if he makes the book we can sell it. Um, Related, if Marvel could hire Roxanne Gay back, that'd be great.
Right.
Uh, or if she could come up, she teased that she had an indie book she was working on that I would also really like to see.
How did Shuri do
Um,
for you? Shuri was really good.
I sold clean out. I thought that I overordered on it, and I sold clean out, and I'm waiting for oh gosh, who was it? Some shop in Ohio is sending me more like media mail right now because I sold out. Sure did great.
Yeah, it was a good book. And Leo Romero, that team of Leo Romero and Jordi Belair on art was on Hawkeye, and they were phenomenal. And then they did a little bit of Captain America, and they were phenomenal. And now they're over there, and I will follow them everywhere. But that book was phenomenal. I was very impressed by it.
I'm delighted. Yeah, it's really good. I was actually a little bit sad that the Wasp and Shuri came out the same week.
Oh,
Um, because I feel like they're so thematically similar, and I think I could have sold more of the Wasp if it had come out a different week. Um, because the women doing cool invention stuff beats are actually really similar.
mm-hmm.
And I think Shuri does it a lot stronger in terms of it does it with a lot higher stakes.
Sure.
Wasp doesn't get to play with a whole lot of like larger universe toys.
Mm-hmm.
It's very internally focused. It's its own story, and they get like Janet and Mockingbird a little bit because she's not doing anything else. But there isn't that sense of like big Marvel story grandness to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, I mean, the Gira art is beautiful, but it's not. It doesn't have a serious vibe to it.
Right.
It's very very cute.
Yeah,
Um,
and for some reason, like the Guri Huru and like other artists like that, I feel like people discount it because of like the lack of the perceived seriousness. It's kind of like I feel like to a certain degree, Squirrel Girl had a hard time getting traction amongst the
I was
typical.
just gonna say,
Yeah, like that.
hmm
That's my like long running favorite comic ongoing series at Marvel. Actually, just pretty much period. And I wrote a review about it, basically around the premise of like how I had to get over myself and to like realize that this is just a great comic. Not that it was mostly just like because it was Squirrel Girl. I was just like Squirrel Girl up until that point had basically been treated like a joke by Marvel. And
well, she was intended as a joke. Yeah.
yeah, but then like Ryan North and Erica Henderson, like they absolutely like changed everything. But I do think a lot of people had a hard time dealing with Erica's art, which is funny because I feel like Erica is actually like objectively one of the best storytellers in comics, but that's an entirely different aside. But anyways, I'm kind of from a Marvel standpoint, has did Fresh Start make a difference for you?
Um, yeah, it lost me a ton of readers.
Really?
Um, I mean, Fresh Start did not lose me a ton of readers. The cancellations ahead of Fresh Start
Mm,
um were on many of my most subscribed books.
yeah.
Um, and so yeah, losing America, losing Hawkeye, losing God, what else? There's a whole there's a whole set of cancellations, and it's fuzzy now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was a rough moment for my Marvel readership. It was literally half my Marvel subscriptions.
Mm-hmm.
And about a third of my subscribers overall.
Wow.
Um, and it's a little better now that Iceman's back, but he's not staying. That's a 5 issue, and we're 3 in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, West Coast Avengers is my second most subscribed Marvel book.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I would really like it if we could keep that one around for a while.
Yeah.
Uh, but even like Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda does not have the readership that Black Panther pre Intergalactic Empire had for me.
Wow.
Um, it's pretty weird, the Intergalactic storyline. I don't know if you're following it. It's
I love it.
fantastic.
I love it.
Pretty
The
weird.
the funny thing is like I actually when I first started reading quotes on Black Panther, I wasn't really crazy about it, but the Intergalactic Empire thing is really like it's so I don't know. This is like kind of a weird comparison, but it just kind of reminds me of those like old school DC out of continuity stories where they would just do something wild and then it would become an iconic story that you keep talking about way down the line. Like I kind of feel like I could see this becoming one of those. At the same time, when you first read it, you're like, what happened? How is this a thing? But it's just like if you kind of succumb to what's happening in there, it's tremendous.
Yeah. No, I'm really enjoying it too. That's one of the ones where I'm like, no, no, you gotta hang in there. But it's because my Black Panther readers were not Marvel readers
Right.
above and beyond. They were Coates readers who were going to give comics a try.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that said, yeah, like I, yeah, there were a ton of cancellations. They were rough on me.
Yeah.
Um, I, let's see. Um, Losing All New Wolverine was a bummer.
Yeah.
The X-23 series is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know, like Champions is so inconsistent. I have not been able to keep a good readership for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I um I love I loved Legacy. I love the current Avengers storyline. Um, it's a bunch of pretty deep cuts. Like
Right.
I feel like you have to care about the Marvel universe to care about Legacy plus Avengers. Um, and I do, but it's not my major fan base.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean it is. That's one of the interesting things about all of like the relaunches that Marvel does is like they're thinking about how they're reinvigorating it for shops or trying to get new number ones and everything like that. But it's like the cost of the books that go away, and it is interesting because it's like the books. I don't know. Again, like another theme is like a lot of the books you're talking about. I don't know if they necessarily valued it in the same way that you did, and they probably expected very few shops to like really feel the pain from that. But those books were perfect for your audience. I don't know. It's
Well, and it's David Gabriel's the head of marketing at Marvel, and he and I have a pretty good chatty relationship. And I mean, he heard from me on every one of those
right.
cancellations. Um, and for some of them, some of them he was like, yeah, the team had run its course, and for some of them he was like, I know, I thought of you as soon as I heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
He sent us, and he's a married gay dude. He sent us 2 cases of Iceman posters for Pride in 2016.
Oh, that's awesome.
In 2017, last year, before the Iceman comic launch. He sent us posters, and our Pride booth was like giving away Iceman posters. The one with like Daddy Mr. Sinister on it.
Yeah.
And it got us a ton of new customers who were like, wait, they do comics with me in them now? Sign me
Mm-hmm.
up. Pride is actually our biggest offsite event every year. We don't do a lot of the big conventions, but we do a huge booth at Pride, and it is my favorite thing. I have so much fun with it.
Yeah. I mean, and like you said, it's a great way to. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing I think a lot of people that aren't represented in comics traditionally don't really realize is that now they're more represented than ever. I mean, like look at something like Tilly Walden's On a Sunbeam. Like that would not have existed, what, 15 years ago? 20 years ago? I don't know.
Well, I mean, Tilly's what, 22?
Right.
It's all very.
I know.
That woman, I'm so impressed with everything she's done. Spinning was gorgeous, but Spinning was her 4th book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she's amazing.
She makes me feel very lazy.
I know, it's true.
All right. Well, I do want to ask. All right. So we're nearing 2019. It's basically 2019 at this point. What are you excited for in 2019? Like, what is your Katie Proctor radar looking at that you feel like is going to be something big for you?
I am certain that Kelly Thompson on Captain Marvel is going to go really, really well.
Yeah.
That is, yeah, absolutely. That's going to be great. Also, Eve Ewing coming on to Ironheart, I'm really excited about. Also, have you been listening to Bughouse Square?
No. What is Bughouse Square?
So Bughouse Square is Eve Ewing's new podcast.
Okay.
And it is her in dialogue with the Studs Terkel tapes from the 60s when he was doing a radio show and he was interviewing major cultural figures.
Mm-hmm.
And she finds contemporary cultural figures who she would like to talk to about the same issues.
Mm-hmm.
And then they list the clips from these tapes from the 60s. And then they have conversations about the contemporary moment.
Wow.
And it's amazing. So anyway, I'm loving that. And I am excited about her coming onto that. And writing Ironheart for a while. No, so those are my big new Marvel enthusiasms.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I am still processing Age of X-Man.
Yeah.
It's an extraordinary set of creators. I'm really into well, God, Leah Williams just knocked it out of the park a couple weeks ago with the What If Magic and the X-Men Black Emma Frost.
Mm-hmm.
Both by her, both the same week, both, I mean, the best comics of the week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she's on to do a miniseries for Age of X-Man, The Extremists. But it's really just Age of Apocalypse with new paint, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a weird when I got the press release. I was just like, they're really rolling deep on this. I mean, it's there. It was like 30 comics, and I was just like, I love Age of Apocalypse. That was like a massive moment for me. But I don't think I ever was like, I want this to happen again. But
Right.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Like you said, good creative teams. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I had a friend who was very excited because apparently Maggot is in one of them. And he loves Maggot like more. I mean, he actually got Scott Lobdell to sign a copy of Maggot's first appearance, and he goes up to him, and Scott Lobdell was charging for signatures. My friend was like, "How much to sign this?" And he's like, "Why do you want this signed?" He's like, "It's the first appearance of Maggot. He's my favorite character." He's like, "I'll sign it for free," because he was just so
Amazing.
floored by the fact that somebody loves Maggot that much. But anyways, but yeah, it really is. It's Age of Apocalypse with new paint. It's a weird thing, but it also, I mean, I love X-Man, so maybe, I don't know.
Right. Totally. No, I reserve judgment. I haven't done my orders for this month yet, so I haven't like big picture looked at January at all. Um, and so it's really just a question of like what announcements have hit my radar. But Bitter Root was amazing last week, has been great for us. We're all big David Walker fans.
It's a really good book.
So looking forward, I know, and that John Jennings essay in the back was fantastic. So I'm looking forward to more of that. But honestly, I've been so and Die. I have big
Mm,
feelings about Die.
yeah.
I actually got to read Die number one, and I loved it, which is
Mm-hmm.
not surprising, but I really loved it. I was a huge gamer in the 90s. I played a ton of Dungeons and Dragons and Vampire the Masquerade and Seven Seas and a lot of other tiny things. Like my main fandom in the mid to late 90s was tabletop RPGs. And so Kieran Gillen, who is one of my favorite writers, and Stephanie Hans, who is one of my favorite artists, teaming up to do a comic that sits so closely in my 90s high school life that they could be sitting in my bedroom is incredibly uncomfortable, and I'm into it. Um, and then also this sort of, because this story is about not that moment, but the sort of adult repercussions of that moment. Um, and that sort of disaffected early millennial um, feeling of like things got broken
Mm-hmm.
early in our lives and we are still dealing with the fallout from it. Like, I feel like that is a sense that a lot of people of my generation have.
Mm-hmm.
You're about the same as me. Our generation have. Um, and it's really interesting to see it explored in a Kieran Gillen voice. Anyway, I'm hugely excited about Die coming out next month.
I have a feeling, I'm just having conversations with some shops. I kind of get the feeling that there's like a quiet hope that that is like something. I mean, this is kind of a dramatic way to look at it, but to like bridge the gap until Saga comes back. Like they have hope that Die will be something big for Image because Saga's a big hole to fill for a lot of shops. I mean, you listed it as like two of your five biggest books, I think, and that's a big deal. So I'm hoping Die will be a big hit for you and other shops as well.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to catastrophize these things, but when I look at my numbers, losing Saga for a year, it's a big deal.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and at the same time, like, I think that um, Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, uh, like, their TikTok publishing schedule in general has been revolutionary. I think it's been really good for them creatively. I think it's been really good because they were big enough names that when they decided, hey, we actually need time off between arcs, other indie creators also felt the ability to say, actually, we need that too.
Yeah. The transparency helps. I mean, it doesn't help you in a big way, but it also like I feel like it's gonna. I feel like you're gonna lose less like subscribers and readers on that book because they were transparent about it. Like I think that
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah, well, and I also just feel like if that is what they need creatively in order to get to the next story, I really think it's the best call. Um, but yeah, I do need a big hit to sell in the meantime. Um, and I'm not sure what it's going to be. I'm looking forward to having the Shanghai Red trade
Hmm.
because that's a book I've been loving, and it's also a big Portland book. Um, and Sabella is one of the creators who's been really wonderful and supportive, and
I know you carried some of his. Didn't you? You had like his mini books, like the Clown
all
Hotel.
of
Yeah, yeah.
he yeah, he lives close and is a sweetheart, and so yeah, we've been lucky enough to have a lot of his stuff in. Um, yeah, what are you excited about for 2019? What am I missing?
The big one I was curious about is it's a fascinating thing because you are a graphic novel store, but you're not a DC store, but you are also a kid friendly store. So like Ink and Zoom kind of seem like up your alley, but at the same time not because it doesn't seem like DC is a big thing for you. So I don't know. I mean, it seems like if any shop it would do well in from a concept standpoint, it would be yours, except for the fact that you're not really that you don't run that deep on DC.
I don't, but I sell a ton of DC superhero girls.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm cautiously optimistic about Ink and Zoom. Um, Honestly, I am very frustrated with how a lot of the marketing has gone. The adoption of illustrated by in
Oh
the
yeah.
cover text absolutely squicked me out. It just gave me the sense that they don't um it made me very uncomfortable with how I felt their priorities were sitting.
Yeah.
Um
It's definitely serving the book
and
market above all.
it is, and in the when they presented at Comics Pro, um, they had zero interior art to
Mm-hmm.
show. So much so that I actually stood up at Comics Pro and asked if these were novels
Yeah.
because I couldn't tell from
Yeah.
the presentation being given. And I still have seen they put out these beautiful little advanced reader copies. So I have now seen some interior art, but it's still only a handful of pages for each book.
Mm-hmm.
And like outside of DC, when an indie comic pitches to me and tells me about the great thing they're going to do and then has only character designs to show me,
Mm-hmm.
what that tells me is that book's not going to happen, or at least not anywhere near the schedule that's being marketed to me.
Right.
Right. Um, we have this great idea for a story and we designed three characters. Look, it's a comic book is just catastrophically unconvincing.
Right.
Um, because I know how long it takes to draw comic books and it's not fast.
Right.
So that always feels to me like it's just asking for trouble. That said, bringing in names that are big in YA literature and teaching those people how to write comic books or, editorially coaching those people into how to write comic books,
Mm-hmm.
I think could be really, really, really good for the market and for my store.
Yeah.
Uh, I do. I am. I mean, I mentioned before that Roxane Gay has been great for me, and I still have people who come into the store and say, "Give me that comic Roxane Gay wrote." Um, and for me, as a fan of Roxane Gay outside of the comic book world, like, yeah, if I was not a comic book person, I would have totally gone and gotten that book anyway because she's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So if some of the ink creators can do that for the, you know, 12 to 17 set,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that would be great. Laurie Anderson's writing an ink book. That's great. Like, I am excited on a fan level about a lot of these people coming in. So, I don't know, cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I am too. I think it's got potential, and I do like that DC's trying different things. I am also I like the idea of the covers. The covers are nice because they'll face out and they'll stand out differently than other comics, and I think that's probably a good thing for them. And I do know somebody who is providing art for one of the books, or is the artist on one of the books. So I like, I know that they're gonna look good and everything like that. It's just I don't know. It's been handled in a very odd way, and it kind of feels like they may have announced them way too early because I don't think they're coming until like June, basically. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It's exciting to see happen. But okay, I'm gonna finish with one more patron question, because there's people. I myself have always wanted to open my own comic shop. You recently did that. Your shop opened in 2016. It was a process for you. What would you say are the most important things someone wanting to open a comic shop needs to know that they might not know? I mean, I think people have a notion as to what comic shops are like. What would you say that the biggest things they would need to know are?
I mean, the I think that remembering to think of it foremost as its own business. And by that I mean you need to know who your audience is, not people who read comics, but really who your target market is, whether they are in the area where you are putting your store. Um, the sort of nuts and bolts of how are you going to market to them, how are you going to reach them, what is your unique value proposition, business school 101 stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I that remembering that stuff is all true, even in a job that looks like a dream job, is really, really key. That you do need to figure out how to make the numbers pencil out. And then I don't want to speak excessively ill of a business that is a key partner for me, but really not underestimating how much time it takes, how much time and extra money it takes to manage a relationship with Diamond. That and really just sort of like going in knowing that you need to stay absolutely on top of your orders and your shortages and your damages and your returns, and fine tooth comb your invoices and make sure that everything that is coming is supposed to come, and that that you're getting credit when it's not. The the patience and even temper that's required to make that business relationship function is something I have maybe 4 days out of 7. It's a really hard relationship to maintain in a business sense, and there's a lot of frustration there. And
Mm-hmm.
well, and then to add to that, making sure that they are not your only source of product is
Right.
hugely important. Like, they have a monopoly where they have a monopoly, and that's how it is. You can't get major floppy comics from anyone but them. That said, you can get trades from other distributors. You can get floppy comics that are not major floppy comics. You can sell other product entirely. I don't sell a lot of non-book product, but one of the retailers who I admire a lot is Jen Hines, who has the Dragon up in, where are they? Toronto? Oh,
Mm-hmm. I think it
in
is.
shop. And she has a huge product mix that I really admire how she handles. And that's for them one of the ways that they buffer against Diamond is hard, and Diamond from Canada is harder. And so it's important to have things that they can sell when the shipment doesn't come in.
Yeah.
So thinking about those pieces of the business, I think is really, really crucial.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think those are essential things, and I'm glad that you have learned them in the process, and I wish you the best of luck going forward. Katie, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about the world of comics retail, your story, and everything else.
Thank you so much, David. This was really fun.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with comics retailer Katie Proctor. You can find her on Twitter at Ink and Pen, her comic shop Books with Pictures on its website at bookswithpictures.com, on Twitter at Books with Pictures, on Facebook at /BooksWithPicturesPDX, and in the shop itself in Portland, Oregon. If you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show on there, you not only support it, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to exclusive written and audio content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes or Stitcher and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. You can find the show on social media by liking it on Facebook at /sketched, that's SKTCHD, follow it on Twitter at @sketchcomic, or following me at @slicefriedgold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Vida Ayala, JDC and Matt Gagnon, Aditya Bidikar, Tara Ferguson, TJ Dawley, Dave Slusher, Kieran Marcantonio, WMQ Comics, Akil, Greg Lockhart, Kokachi, Phil White, Ben Becker, Sean Pinello, Kent Heidelman, Philip Sevi, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Paletto, Dylan Campbell, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Mike Gillis, Adam Bogert, Xavier Files, Maria Schweitzer, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Dan Guarino, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Evan Blazer, Brian McRae, Ira James Udaskin, Henning Allers, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bruno Batista, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, Darren Neely, John Hendrick, Steve Anderson, Phil Nall, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Shipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Maxwell Schmidt, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Lou Iovino, Nicholas Kesslake, Greg Rucka, Ryan Mail, Adam Heifel, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris Morris, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim DiMonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track Outro from the album Volmilch opens the show. Give them a listen as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.